Gold was down hard yesterday, and looking at the S&P 500, that was down hard yesterday as well. From my recent videos on gold and the general stock market, you might remember that I mentioned that perhaps both are likely to continue climbing into that FOMC meeting when Jeremy Powell will likely be somewhat hawkish, dropping everything down into the daily and intermediate cycle lows. That's the S&P 500, and I was expecting something similar for precious metals, for gold as well. And yes, Jay Powell did turn out to be relatively hawkish, but much earlier than I expected. He took a pretty hawkish stance in his talk yesterday. Here, as I mentioned, Jay Powell was again pretty hawkish in his talk yesterday. So everything is down except for the US dollar, which of course is higher. But the daily cycle on the US dollar is now 34 days long. Usually these daily cycles last for around a couple of months on the US dollar. So perhaps general trend upwards on the US dollar to test the 200-day moving average by the time of that FOMC meeting later near the end of March. And by then the daily cycle on the US dollar will perhaps be in the time frame of some sort of a top, bouncing down from that 200-day moving average and perhaps declining down into the daily cycle low. But what it implies for most assets is that in the very short term, perhaps for another couple of weeks as dollar continues higher, both precious metals and perhaps general stock market as well are likely to start declining down into that daily cycle and perhaps even intermediate cycle low earlier than I was expecting. It's even possible, although it's not very common, that this daily cycle on the S&P 500 has already topped on the third day. That's very, very early within a new daily cycle. And looking at gold, looks like gold has topped after about a week of going up. That's a little bit more usual than topping, say, on day number 3. Daily cycle is now 9 days long on the gold. So if it has already topped a couple of days ago, which is pretty likely right now, then even if there is a bit of a short-term bounce, we'll likely see gold temporarily continue down into that daily cycle low, and perhaps that will be the end of that intermediate cycle, giving you that chance to reaccumulate. We've mentioned about this reaccumulation phase before the new intermediate cycle starts. The negative recent development is that this decline into the daily cycle low started earlier than expected.